Hello, friends. We continue studying the Gospel of John, and today we're going to study one verse from chapter 1, verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. Here we can see that this verse is connected to the previous passage in which John, the author of this gospel, talked about how the Word came to his own people, and his own people did not receive him, but those who did receive him, they also received the authority or power to become the children of God, who were born of God. And John continues by saying that the Word became flesh. As you can see, the Word is mentioned again and again, and he interchanges this word with the word light. In this case, he comes back and he says, and the Word became flesh. What does it mean? This sentence means that the Word, the one who created everything, who was God, became flesh. And the word flesh means a human being. The Word that existed before the foundation of the world became flesh. This is the miracle of all times. The Word, eternal God, became a human being. So the flesh means human being. John talks about this miraculous transformation of the eternal Word through whom everything was created and who became a human being. That is unheard of. Not only that, he became flesh, and it says, and the Word dwelt among us. Who is he talking about when he says among us? And then he says, and we saw his glory. Apparently, John, the author of this gospel, talks about himself and most likely other people, his fellow Israelites, among whom this Word became flesh. In other words, the Word was born. Otherwise, how can eternal God become a human being? He needs to find means of becoming human. And one of the means is to be born as a human being. And apparently nothing is impossible for God, so God made it possible for himself to become a human being. And so John writes that he dwelt among us. Dwelt simply means lived. He lived among us, and we saw his glory. We could also mean the disciples of Jesus Christ, because John was a disciple, and he says, we saw his glory, the glory of the Word. Whose glory was that? The glory of the Word. And apparently the word glory in this verse is one of the key words because it's repeated a couple of times. Glory, glory, and he says we saw his glory. What is he referring to? He explains right here. He says his glory was as of the only begotten from the Father. That's an interesting expression that he's using here. When he uses this conjunction as, he uses it to compare. What kind of glory? What was the glory like? The one that we saw, he writes. It was the glory as of the only begotten from the Father. What does it mean? The only begotten from the Father. And apparently, the Father means God the Father. The only begotten from the Father means that he is one of his kind. There is no one like him. He is the only one who is eternal Word, who also is the life-bearing light, as we talked about before. And John says that he was the only begotten from the Father. And he continues describing the type of glory that he, as his disciple, saw. He says the Word was full of grace and truth. Grace and truth. These are two attributes of the only begotten from the Father, the eternal Word of God that became flesh. These are two of his attributes. He has more than two, of course, but John mentions grace and truth. Why is grace so important? Grace is the undeserved favor from God, and truth is an absolute, one of the absolutes that cannot be contested, that cannot be suppressed or perverted. The truth always remains the truth. And this Word of God, who became flesh, was full of grace and truth. In other words, he represented God's undeserved favor to humans and also God's truth. So there we go. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and we will continue next time.